Welcome to the Architecture Made Simple podcast, brought to you by Scrace Architects. In this series of podcasts, Tim and Andy explore different aspects of architecture, design and art.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Architecture Made Simple podcast with me, Andy, and him, Tim. And Tim is involved in something really special. It's called the Graduate Art Show. So we're going to be deviating a little away from architecture for this episode and talking more about art. But
as is our way.
As deviate and we wouldn't be very good on just a minute because we are full of deviation. So Tim, give me a bit of background. When did the Graduate Art Show begin and how did you get involved?
So, Andy, the Graduate Art Show was formed sort of only a couple of years ago. And I found out about it through the Vanna Gallery, which is a new contemporary art gallery in Salisbury. And in its first couple of showings, the Graduate Art Show came down from London to Salisbury. And so the Graduate Art Show in itself presents young graduates in fine art, in either in the sort of the bachelor form or the master's form, to present their work in a commercial and high-end gallery space. And so it's a real sort of kickstart to any young artist or up-and-coming artist's career. I contradict myself with young artists, but we just discovered that, in talking to Victoria, that last year, they had a 74-year-old artist come along.
But we could use the term young as in someone at the beginning of their career.
Exactly, yeah. So it's really for artists at the beginning of their career. And so I've been lucky enough to learn a little bit more about it over the past year as I've joined as a judge, and I've been again fortunate enough to see the level of work that's coming out of colleges across the country. For example, I was up in London and met with Anand Sagar, who's also a contemporary and associate of the art show itself, and we had the opportunity to walk through Central St Martin's private view, and it was just astonishing to see the variety and the quality and the talent that's coming out of that organisation, as much as it is from other art shows and colleges across the country. And so the art show sort of distills maybe sort of 500 applicants down into a selection, and that selection is toured. So we had a show up in Fitzrovia, up in London, and then subsequently it's being brought down to Salisbury this week. So
as we go through what is the Graduate Art Show, we're going to kind of do three parts of this podcast. We're going to talk to David Christie, who's the director of the Vanna Gallery in Salisbury. We're also going to talk to Victoria Charlton, who is one of the founders, one of the people who set up the Graduate Art Show. But we're also going to talk to some of the artists in the later parts of this podcast about what they are getting from the show, what their feelings around the show, and how it feels for them to be in the show.
Yeah, really their experiences. Yeah, and I think that what we'll learn is just about sort of the platform that it offers all of these artists, and the rich diversity that there is in art out there at the moment. Welcome, David.
Thank you.
Welcome, David.
Thank you.
So I think it'd be useful for us to kind of understand how the gallery features in respect of the Graduate Art Show, and also maybe about how the Graduate Art Show is instrumental in providing access to art.
Yeah, so the gallery is about to host the Graduate Art Show for the second time. The first time we showed it was in February last year, and that was done in a short period of time. I'd seen the show in London, liked it a great deal, knew Victoria, and I said, this is so great, I want to bring it to Salisbury because it's a great example of what the gallery is designed to do, which is to bring work here to Salisbury and the people of Salisbury and around here that wouldn't ordinarily be shown here. Yeah. It's It's a gallery for very good work. Doesn't necessarily mean it's always very expensive. Sometimes it is, but that's not the goal. It's about the work. So when we were bringing it back, and I've been thrilled to be, as you say, a judge on it this year. And so we are the only iteration of that show that exists outside London. And I know we're going to go on and talk about access, and I think that's important in itself, because you can come and see work of that stature on the high street in Salisbury without having to go to London or further afield.
I think that's something you've spoken about before, isn't it? When you spoke at the Ignite event the other week, we talked about how, that sort of open door policy to kind of gain access to the gallery was important to you.
There is, and for a long time and still persists, this psychological barrier people need to clear or punch through somehow to go into an art gallery. I wish it wasn't like that. It's, to some extent, it's a symptom of you want to host the best work, so you need to create a really nice space. And so they end up looking quite kind of unintentionally exclusive. And people don't come in, I think, for that reason. They don't know maybe how to be in a place like that. They might feel it's an exam situation. Someone's going to ask them, do they know about the work or whatever? And that's because I think we over intellectualize art, and that keeps people away. So my gallery, and it's not just mine, lots of others. I think we try and pride ourselves in saying that's not necessary. Come in and look. I want people to come in. I want people to come in and look and enjoy the work. Whether they want to talk to me about it or anyone else while they're there, that's totally fine, but they can come in and have a look. There's no obligation or compulsion to buy anything. Of course there isn't. And it starts a habit, I think. I think once you've broken that psychological barrier the first time and you've gone into a gallery and enjoyed it, you can do it again and again and start to sort of reap the rewards, as it were.
And it is a strange thing, because I find an art gallery intimidating, because as we've talked about several times on this podcast, I am a bit of a Luddite. I appreciate art, but I feel intimidated, because I don't always know how to act, especially in some of the more exclusive art galleries that exist in the country, especially in London, or bigger cities. But also I don't always understand the language, although I can appreciate something's aesthetically pleasing, and I will take something from that. I find the communication bit, and it's how you go about that's intimidating for me.
How the gallery goes about it,
about how I go about that, how I act, because I'm quite especially when I'm nervous, I become quite loud and quite. I start talking a lot, not necessarily in a loud voice, but there's quite a lot of noise emanating from my mouth, if that makes sense. And sometimes that's not acceptable. And sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not. But then that just brings fear into me, and I'm sure I'm not alone in that, in feeling maybe.
But I suppose that's the same is true of kind of any kind of civic building or a space that makes you feel awkward. I mean, the space I recall being similar to that was when I went for an interview in a warehouse, and they'd hired out a whole floor, but at the other end were 6 desks, and that was where I was going for interview. And it's that kind of, it's almost like the space sometimes, just having space, because people aren't used to having space, can be something that can act as a barrier. But my experience of David's Gallery is very much about that welcoming, and almost the domestic scale of it makes it very, and once you're within the space, it makes you feel very welcome and comfortable, because it's almost as if you're in the front room of someone's home. And I think that works very well in terms of the setup of the gallery. And when you're within the space, it offers that experience of just being comfortable in a space and comfortable with art.
But I guess my question to David, which was trying to get round to while I waffled, was how do you get someone across the threshold? That's because once you've got them in and you've reassured them, not necessarily by talking to them, but kind of just letting them be and letting them be themselves. But how do you get someone to step through the doorway?
I think there's a couple of things. I think there's an obligation on people that run galleries to get the balance right between letting people wander and enjoy and engaging with people, right? So funnily enough, I think in the kind of galleries that we are talking about, where you might feel intimidated, you might have to press a buzzer or something to go in, and it's all very hushed and quiet and all very la-di-da. what I hear most of all that people worry about in those situations is that, or they complain about, is that there'll be someone sitting at a computer completely ignoring them, like as if they don't matter, right? Which is not right. At the other end of the spectrum, what you might find is that someone will be perhaps too close to you and it'll be claustrophobic.
Hovering.
They might be talking to you about, they'll be trying to sell you something potentially, right? And that's that's not good either. So at either end of the spectrum, you can't overdo either of those things. So for me, it's about a warm welcome and then letting people enjoy it. I think the second part of your question is more about, how do you get people across the threshold? Does the way you lay the room out to some extent is a contributing factor. You try and put the most striking, appealing things in the front as much as you can prejudge what that's going to be. Right now we have a life-size feather figure sculpture that's stopping the traffic and that's brought people in. It's a beautiful thing. Not necessarily always a positive reaction, but a reaction nonetheless, and that's good. It's better than nothing. That's that. But the other part of it is I think you build the audience one visitor at a time. So if you're dealing with someone who's been a bit shy and a bit unsure, and they come in and have a great time, now that for them that might be, I was left alone, or I had just the right amount of interaction and it wasn't overly claustrophobic or knowledge led. They'll go away and tell someone else. And they'll tell someone else. And actually, I think that's my experience, is that's how we built our audience in some ways. By people feeling comfortable, to Tim's point, feeling it's an accessible place and surviving it. They came in and they survived it and they enjoyed it and they told someone else, and that's how it grows.
Now, this might sound like a really clunky analogy, but I'm going to say that staff in an art gallery sound to me like they need to be a bit like the landlord in a pub. You need to be a bit of something to everyone. Yes. And you need to read a person incredibly quickly to make them feel at home.
Completely. Yeah, completely. And we try and do that.
Yeah, cool.
I'll try and live up to that. I think, I can think of great landlords that would set a good example.
And we've all been into pubs where you feel at home, even when all the locals go, chomp, you're not a regular, but as soon as you've made your order at the bar, you feel like you're there. And I guess that's the aim with what you're doing at the Vanna Gallery.
Exactly.
Very good. I didn't imagine they'd be compared, the pub and the Vanna.
But I think every host of any venue,
exactly,
has got that. That's their job, is to make someone feel welcome and at home.
Yeah, to be a host is part of making people feel welcome, isn't it?
Oh, completely. And I would say if you had to stack and rank all the factors that are important to me about my own place, that is the most important one. Almost not above the work. I mean, the work is critical. The program is critical, but you're going to do that anyway. We could put the same program in and I could host the same program two very different ways. And I choose to host it in a way that puts the visitor first, whether they're clients or not. And visitors can eventually become clients.
Yeah.
So that's the most important thing to me.
Well, the majority of people have some form of artwork on their walls at home, whether it's original artwork, like I've got several of Tim's artwork on my wall, and my wife's uncle, we got loads of his artwork on the wall because he's an annoyingly talented man. But we've also got stuff that's kind of off-the-shelf print stuff, so it's part of a big run. When I say big, a couple of thousand. Or we've got our own photographs. Everyone's got art on their wall, and it's just overcoming that barrier to switching between something you buy as a print from a high street retailer to buying something that's original or different. And sometimes the price isn't that different. And that's the other thing that people need to get over. People think that original artwork is incredibly expensive, and often it's not. Or not as expensive as their kind of brain thinks it's going to be.
Totally. Tim knows that for me, it's very important that we have a price spread in the gallery, by which I mean it must start at an accessible price, so I will factor that in every show. The numbers may go up, and they often do, and that's by definition. Good work can often cost a lot, but it doesn't have to. And actually, the graduate show is a good example of that, because we're working with artists here who are at the start of their career. The prices tend to be more modest and accessible, so people can come into our room and see something very good. And I think they would be surprised at how accessible some of the price points are.
But you're potentially buying a future star.
Yeah, you potentially are. Although I think that...
Although you're potentially buying someone who's going to go and work a normal 9-to-5 job in an office as well. You never know.
I think we keep coming back to. I was going to talk about your saying that you've got a mix of things, and most people do. The common factor between all the things, wherever you got them, however much you paid, should just be you like it.
Yeah.
And I think for me, we talked earlier on about the over-intellectualization of it. That's good. For me, it's about sequencing. So what you'll sometimes see too often is I think, an analytical, exercise about the work, the tradition it sits in, who it's like. We compare artists very often, blah, blah, blah. And then do you like it? And people are trying to establish or arrive at something's worth, as it were, in that way. Whereas actually it should be flipped. It's, I like this, and therefore, if I want to, I can choose to understand the techniques and the tradition and the process and the artist's broader practice and blah, blah, blah. But you have to like it first, because that's what it should
otherwise,
always
what's
come
the
back
point?
to. Really, otherwise, yeah, what's the point? And you could like something that cost you everything you've got, or something that you won't even feel, and you could like them just the same.
Yeah, it's true, isn't it? I mean, if you go in to buy a shirt in a shop, it's almost making art as accessible as that we've got to kind of achieve, and I think it will come. I think people are educating themselves about creativity, and there's a lot more kind of access to that through the telly in the way that there wasn't before, and through social media channels, and hopefully that will overcome some of these kind of access issues. And in some ways, I feel that I as an artist found it hard and necessarily to kind of stand up against my contemporaries initially, because there's still this sort of history behind that, and there's an establishment, and it's almost you're fighting against an establishment that may or may not exist. And I think very quickly, if you break down those barriers, and that's something I'd be saying to young artists out there, is that just get out there and make sure that people know about you, because suddenly those barriers don't become quite as big anymore, and you can talk to people on the level.
Yeah, and I think that your point about an establishment is an interesting one, because we might assume, artists are these deities and these, highfalutin figures that you can't approach or wouldn't want to talk to you or know you, and it's so opposite. Really, the truth is so different, right? I'm thinking about particularly some of the young artists we're about to host now. Thinking about the younger audience, they're just like, you and me. They're just the same. And actually, funnily enough, it's the same is true with most disciplines. The people who are the best at it talk about it the most modestly, in the clearest terms. They're the most welcoming. And so that's another reason to go into a gallery. There's a fairly good chance an artist will be there. And that deepens your connection with the work, and you'll get on with them like a house on fire. Everyone's lovely. And
I guess the nice thing, especially about something like the Graduate Art Show, is there's going to be a huge variety there on show. It's not like if an artist creates a collection, it's often on a theme, or there's kind of a something that links it all, a golden thread that runs through all of it. Whereas this is a whole load of different pieces of work by a whole load of different pieces of people, with different mediums, with different kind of structures and ways of going about things, different thought processes. So 2 questions off the back of that. Is that really hard to kind of put into a gallery space because you don't have that kind of storytelling going on? But also, does it make it interesting as well because you've got so much different stuff, and it makes it more of a challenge and fun for you? It's fun. Putting the show in is the best bit. We're about to do it. I cannot wait. Right now, I'm in the dull bit. I've been filling walls and painting them all day, and that's all fine. But on Monday morning, I'll have a blank canvas and 22 pieces of work. And diverse as they are, there's always, it's like a Rubik's Cube, there's always a solution, right? Yeah.
And you start to lay it out, you shuffle it, you play with it, you see the works will have different dialogues between them. You consider the sightlines, blah, 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 blah. There's ways of doing it, but it should be pretty organic. And then a day or so later, 2 days later, you turned it into a show, and that's the best thing. And actually, I was listening to your question that reminded me of your earlier point about how do you bring people in, and a show like this is a really good way to do it, because if it's that mixed, it's that diverse, there's a chance you're going to like something. Whereas if you see a solo show in a space, I love solo shows, by the way, and we do them all the time, but it's easy to judge that and dismiss that in the street. You can see one name on the poster, one example on the poster, one work in the front room, don't like it, that's not for me, I'm not going in. it creates a sense of intrigue. They're really good football drivers, group shows like this, and so your challenge is to make the work lock. And so that when people come in, there's a journey and a flow and a sort of narrative to it. You have to create that yourself, because you're dealing with so many different people.
The advantage as well, I think, particularly with the graduate art shows, you're dealing with a monstrous amount of talent, and that's been filtered down by 9 judges.
Yeah.
And so we've each come at it with our own perspective, and so we've selected our favourites, and then that's narrowed down what is actually selected within the group. And so you've got the best of the best, but with a selection and variety that's probably second to none. And so when you've got that in a space, it really does pop. And to have the young talent in that space just shows kind of what the future holds, really.
And it's amazing it's coming to Salisbury, because with all due respect to Salisbury, we're not like a Manchester or a Birmingham or a Liverpool. We're not known for having such. It's a big thing for the graduates who are in the art show. This is one of the biggest things that's ever happened in their career, and having it shown in London, you kind of would expect that for it to be shown in Salisbury is great to make it more accessible, because then people don't have to go on the train. They can come down from Bath, up from Southampton, and come and see some really high class art in a kind of more relaxed way, if you like.
Yeah, I would say reassuringly, and Tim, you'll recognise this, we had 9 or 10 of the artists who were in the show in February last year come to the private view. It's no less of a deal for them to be shown here, than it was in London. In fact, and actually, they were just as excited about it, if not more so. They love the space. You got to be careful you don't jinx upcoming shows, but it was probably more commercially successful than London. The sell through was really good. There's no guarantee that'll happen again. There's nothing secondary or lesser about this show here. This is a full on exhibition that will do justice to the work, just as they did.
And I didn't mean it was in lesser, but in terms of, if you said, this thing's happening in London, to the kind of layman, this thing's happening in London, it kind of carries a natural gravitas, whereas you say this is happening in Salisbury.
Well, it's happening in both, which is...
Yeah.
So it's that, and I think often this is the case, is that kind of, it's got the Fitzrovia postcode, but there's also, there's gravitas at both ends, and I think that's the quality that David and the gallery have brought to Salisbury, and I think that's where the credit should be given, really, in terms of sort of that level of quality and contemporary artwork. I think it's raised our game, and that's great for the city and great for the culture. But the connection between the two is very strong, and I think it's very strong in terms of what could happen, and that's the exciting bit, is knowing what happens next.
There's not many people who can compete with the vista that's around the gallery that we have, with you being based on the high street.
It's stunning there.
There's not many places in the world that can compete with.
No.
You stepping outside the door, turning left, and then you've got...
Yeah, we're a few yards away from one of a worldwide destination, probably the nicest square mile in England, and I agree with your point completely. For the visitors, they're stunned almost that we've got that sort of work in Salisbury. They'll come in and say, we've got the Royal College, Chelsea, Goldsmiths, the Slade, you name it, they're all there. The biggest schools, and the best students from these schools, and that's, as I said before, that's what the gallery's there to do, bring work like that to people here. So it's good for the visitors, good for the artists, good for the city.
And make it accessible.
Very much so.
So, Tim, we have another guest on the podcast. Would you like to do the introduction, because you know them so much better than I?
Yeah, well, Victoria Charlton, who's a good friend of mine, is also a lead on the Graduate Art Show. And I was very lucky to meet Victoria through the Vanna Gallery, and over time we got to talking about art, and it seemed like the right time to kind of join forces, I think is fair to say. And I've been very lucky to become a judge on the show, and Victoria's got a quite a catalogue and quite an extensive history. And
Well, you've written in front of me, creative impresario.
yeah, well, that doesn't quite sum her up, I don't think. So there's a lot more to talk about, but we're definitely here today to talk about the Graduate Art Show, which is very much a passion of hers. And I'm just keen to hear a little bit more about what the Graduate Art Show offers.
Should we start by explaining exactly what the Graduate Art Show is? I suspect it's pretty much what it says on the tin. It's a load of recent graduates and their art.
Well, it takes the BA and MA, so they kind of decided to go back. They don't necessarily have to be kids, It's just going through the degree course. Because last year, one of the people we showed was 74. She was originally a marketing director. She gave it up. And Anita Chada. And she went to Central St. Martin's, passed through with distinction. Oldest person in the class. Mm-hmm. Brilliant artist. She came down and showed here at the Vanna. And that's what's important, is it doesn't matter what the age is. It's just you can morph yourself into a different career. You don't have to stay with what you are.
No.
I know that because I'm schizophrenic, but I have had to be because I've always dealt with, I started off as a journalist, but then live art, and then I did my first exhibition in the 80s. I brought the Hermitage exhibition to England from what was Leningrad then. Had no idea what I was doing. But fortunately, the director was wonderful and bought the coaches and the costumes and all that stuff. But I was determined. And that's what the key is for these young artists. They get themselves into university, and the one who's showing at the Vanna on Thursday when he comes down is Oliver Murdoch from Goldsmiths. He's now a junior fellow of Goldsmiths. He started off in Halifax living with his grandparents, got himself into Goldsmiths, does all sorts of jobs in the evening to get him through college. He doesn't have rich parents like many of the artists here, graduates, but they come from China, they come from, all over the world.
They have fortunate backgrounds. But not all of them. And some of the most interesting don't. No. Because they've had to have more of a determination to learn the craft, like Oliver. And he doesn't just produce great sculptures. He's very determined on what he's going to produce. He also paints. A lot of his they're beautiful. I've got friends who bought 4 of his pieces. But what's so good about here is that I think David Christie at the Vanna has a more open mind than most gallery directors. Mm-hmm. The other ones who work with me will hate me for saying that. An open mind in what way? He's
open to all different artists. He's picked, the Vanna will be showing, I think it's 5 that he chose from the original just under 400 submissions that he felt were better than the ones that were shown in London. Now, that's not fair to the ones that are shown in London, but it's the fact.
No, and there's personal preference in that as well.
There is, but David has a very fine eye.
Yes.
And I think the one thing we all know is if you're buying something that's visual, it's all down to your eye. It's how you see things and how you understand how the artist has arrived at it. And so he's showing an extra artist who's coming from Bournemouth, Astle, who was not shown in London. He's got quite a few. And he picked artists last year that were very unusual and were not necessarily, and they've done well. And that's why we do it. That these kids go on to have further exhibitions, or they're not all kids, of course. And in fact, Yasmin Watts, who's coming down, she started off as an architect. She put herself into the Royal College. Now she's a sculptor. And I think that's why I do it, because these people have redirected themselves, but they have a passion for what they're doing.
And I guess it's exciting too, to discover new artists and new perspectives on things that you've possibly never seen before.
Yes, because working with established museums, because I worked with a museum in Moscow for 10 years, that's all established art. It's obvious. It's obvious. So what I like is the surprises we get all the time when you open up one of their folders that they're sending in and you think, this is really good. You know, you look
What's
up
their
where
name? Yeah, where are they from?
where
Who
are
are they?
from? Yeah, and they're from all over. There's people from the Cardiff, Newcastle, Manchester, Liverpool. Glasgow's an extremely good school. Bournemouth has got 3 in at the Vanna, which only 2 of them are in London, but 3 are here. And they're going to do well. And I know they're all going to do well. Charlie Ottaway, he's a sculptor. He got commissions the minute they saw his work in London, trained in Bournemouth.
And it's so the show works as a really effective platform for the artists, as well as
it does,
not just as a sales tool,
no,
but also as a kind of initial platform for their careers.
Well, it also sales do work. I come from a commercial background, and they reinforce your desire to do what you're doing.
And your confidence, I suppose.
It does. It makes a lot of difference. You've been slogging away for 3 and 4 years, and suddenly people saying, yeah, I like this in my living room. Yeah, this will do. You know, often people look down on that approach, but I think it's the only way forward. You know, can you live with this? Can you live with it? Same when you're buying a piece of furniture. But art, and particularly buying it this time, means you're getting them at the beginning of their career. I mean, because it's not going to last what they work at commercially now.
Yeah.
They're building up their own provenance. That's what they're doing. That's what I want to do for them, is build up the provenance. So something that was valuable maybe for £1,000 or £2,000 last year, they're going to sell it. It's going to be 4,000 this year. And I know that because I know people who've bought the pieces. So that's the way.
It's funny, isn't it? In a way that, you know, the first step is almost getting in the gallery the first time.
Oh yes.
And I think, you know, when we went up to London, and you know they show in London, and the first show in Fitzrovia, you know, at the Wolf, and then at the William. They were amazing events in themselves, you know, the private views. So, you know, well over 100 artists and family and friends. The buzz around the place is quite phenomenal. And you see the energy that's coming out of Art College, and you bounce off it. So, you know, even as a judge, you can sense the power of the moment, and also the power of the art that has probably been distilled over those 4 years, you know, 4 years of study.
And other dealers go in and they pick up those artists. We don't hold the artists once we've shown them, then they're in the open sea. But the truth is they get picked up by dealers, you know, who then their career is on the trajectory going upwards. But you've got to get them to that stage.
And then it's up to them, I suppose, when you're kind of a launch pad.
You've got to keep working.
Not an arm round the shoulder.
No.
Going onwards.
No.
We've given you this. Go and do it now.
And they also have to get used to the criticism. You know, when they submit pieces, and if let's say they submit 2 pieces, and the judges say, "Oh, I don't like that piece," they've got to understand that's what life is going to be like.
Yep.
It's the same as if you're a dancer, a singer, or a musician. People are going to say,
it's probably a 1 in 10 chance for anyone applying to get into gallery because of the nature and the you know how keen people are to enter the
well, I guess the odds are even higher than that, because they'll be the ones who wouldn't even submit because they know that they're not at that standard.
Yeah.
And then those who are top in their sitting high within their cohort at each university will go, well, maybe I've got a chance. Yeah. And maybe that's the 1 in 10. But how many hundreds are sat below that?
Well, it's higher than one. I mean, with the last year's show, Daniel Hayton from De Montfort, a severely autistic young man, amazing mother who's helped him and supported him. He didn't really want to talk to me when I went up to the show, because they have their graduate art shows. But let's be truthful, they're friends, family, aunties and uncles who come in and say, aren't you clever?
Yeah.
But that's not the real world.
No.
That's not the real world. And I was up there looking, and he took one look at me and decided he definitely wasn't going to talk to me. And so I hovered around. And he did get in. He was in the first show. And piece was sold in London. Piece was sold by David Christie at the Vanna. And that's why I like to work here, because David's choice is wide, and I like that. He, you know, and once they've experienced a professional gallery, and he runs a tight ship there. It gives them an idea of what it's really like. He has to talk it through with the consignment document. He has to talk through what the price is going to be, what the realistic approach is. That's what it's going to be like for the rest of their lives.
And I guess that's the hardest bit of an artist. It's relatively easy. I'm not going to say it's really easy to sit in your shed or your back bedroom and create artwork. The hard bit's sharing it. And then the even harder bit is placing a value on that.
And having criticism.
Yeah. And by value, I don't necessarily mean monetary value. I mean critical value. Whether other people like it or not, or what people do like and don't like. That's the really scary bit about creating anything.
Yeah, it is. But everybody has to, I when I first went into the gallery at the Vanna, I walked around the close when I first moved here. I've only been here nearly 3 years. And I came out and I saw he took I think it was a hairdresser's, and then he's converted it to a stunning gallery. So I knew that he knew what it meant,
Yeah.
There was value in it.
Yeah, he had to make that so that the artists feel comfortable, because now he gets international shows going in there. So it's going to be very good for these students who they're all keen. Everybody's come down, delivered the work, and it'll be up and finished tomorrow. We've got the private view tomorrow, and the kids will come. One of them's coming from Liverpool, Manchester. Somebody's coming down from Glasgow. They just want to see their work on a wall. But after that, it gives them confidence.
Tim and I are at the Graduate Art Show exhibition at the Vanna Gallery in Salisbury. Tim, we've been joined by an artist. Would you like to do a short introduction?
So Yasmin Watts. Yasmin and I met through the Graduate Art Show, me being a judge and Yasmin being an applicant. And we really loved her work, and so much so that she was shown both in London and now in Salisbury. And what excited me about meeting Yasmin was our close affinity in that we're both, I'm a transitioning architect to artist, I think probably, and Yasmin's already made the jump. So there was something very special about her work that kind of sang to me about the spaces in between, and that's something that I think is something that sort of carries through in her work, and particularly about people and about the interactions about people. And so I think that's something that interests you. Is that right?
Definitely. It's something which has always interested me. I've been a people watcher all my life, and I've always been interested in art from childhood onwards. With the architectural projects I've worked on with my husband in our company, we've done contemporary, modern, curvy, folded buildings. So there's a whole sculptural aspect to it, which led me naturally into doing the sculpture, which I've started over the last 5 years in trying to promote public sculpture. And that's what my work, which has been shown tonight, is all about, bringing the general public into public spaces. So I created a setting called a microspace, where general public can come in, interact, sit, and feel as if they're part of it, and also put their own identity onto it. So I mix the architecture with figurative sculpture, and that's where I want to go.
And did it feel like a bit of a leap entering something like the Graduate Art Show?
It did. I had done a 2-year course at Heatherley School of Art in London, where I learnt the traditional crafting skills of sculpture, which I had no knowledge of. And then I did a master's at the RCA in research, where I developed my practice, my thinking, and how to address what I'm doing with the general public.
And when you were selected to appear at the Graduate Art Show, how did that make you feel?
I was overwhelmed. It was such a lovely surprise. I had applied with everyone else in the whole country, and to be selected is such an honour. I'm really, really grateful for the opportunity, because it's a great launching pad.
And you've had a brief look around, I think. What do you and I guess seen lots of of the work before. What do you think of the other works that you're surrounded by?
I think they're all amazing because everything is quite different. Even the sculptural elements are quite different. Everyone's got their own particular style and the way they approach their work, which is fascinating. And it's great working with like-minded colleagues where you can interact and collaborate together. So it's a wonderful event.
So we popped outside with Millie, Tim, who we're going to call her the sandwich girl because she said it, so we're going to use it.
Okay.
Yeah. Who was shown in London and is now being shown in Salisbury. Do you want to do a little introduction, Tim?
Well, I think Millie's work's really quite kind of its time and quite there's a sort of postmodern feel to it. A little bit kitsch, I would say, maybe, but a little bit tongue in cheek, but a lot of pink. Yeah. But there's a bit more of a story to it, which is about processing and about sort of how things are. So I think Millie maybe is in a better place to kind of talk about her work than I am.
So tell us about your work. Here we have a stack of sandwiches in a box, but it's far more than that.
Yes, so for my actual degree show, I made sort of like a mini Subway in a way. So I made a massive sandwich counter, all the fillings, 12 fillings, and so the audience could make their own sandwich if it was a real sandwich shop.
Yeah.
So I look at food as if it links to identity and what your choices of food then says about you. So I was born with left side cerebral palsy. So basically, when I was looking at the different foods and the different choices, it reminded me of food from my childhood. So like, I struggle cutting things up, actually creating real dishes and stuff. So almost making it and doing it in entirely fake way, it was like it became like a game and like childhood play, because I always used to like stand like in a little plastic kitchen that my mum bought and do it that way, and that was so much easier than actually making food like as an adult in real life. So it sort of brought back that childness play, really. Yeah.
So tell us how you found out about and ended up entering the Graduate Art Show.
So I actually found it on Instagram. I just came across it because I always look at open calls just to see, what's about, and so I entered it, and I was really shocked that I got in, to be honest. And just went from there.
And now you are in.
Yeah.
How does that make you feel?
I'm so honoured, I'm so grateful. Going up to Wolf, meeting Nick, the director, that was absolutely insane. It was one of the first London shows as well, and honestly, like the exposure, the actual experience, because it is really hard, like after graduating uni, to get into these shows. So it's a really nice bridge after uni, and it's just done really well, and it's a really nice introduction into what art can be like after uni. Yeah.
So what's the plan from here?
So the plan is I've got a residency actually at 44 AD Art Space in Bath. So I'm currently making some more work. It's going to sound absolutely insane, but I'm creating a fake pub surrounding crisps, which is going to be on show in August in Bath. So that is the plan. And then I'm just doing odd couple shows here and there.
So I've only got one question for you left. Can Andy and I come to the fake pub?
Yes, of course.
Excellent.
We're outside again with Joseph Rolfe, and I'm quite excited because I think Andy's been persuaded by the amazing artistry that of Joseph's pieces, and I think they're really graphically strong. They've got a lovely colour, lovely kind of. There's a bit of tongue-in-cheek in there as well, and a little bit of some strong words. So I think that probably it's best that Joseph maybe offers a little bit of limelight on his work, and maybe Andy can tell us a little bit of what drew him to him.
So the project is called Batteries Not Included. It's a series of 15 images, all of which are visual puns accompanied with a graphic text. The idea was to produce an eye-catching image that for a moment you glance at and understand, but stays in your mind for a day or more, or in some cases even longer if you really appreciate the work or find it funny. The inspiration, of course, came from advertising, and having worked as an engineer and technical designer, I really focused on trying to get everything organised in sort of uniformity, so the text in the same places across images, exactly the same spacings, sizes and proportions of objects in exactly the same positions, and things of that nature, really aiming to get sort of perfection of positioning, and then the backgrounds lit separately to get these beautiful gradients that guide your eyes across the image, across the text, and across the visual pun itself. The entire idea of humour actually came from sort of a series of struggles that I'd have through my 20s. So the inspiration came from early British sort of sitcoms, such as Only Fools and Horses, sort of that tongue-in-cheek comedy that I used to watch with my father and grandfather, because in a space of 2 years, from 2020, I lost both of them, and I wanted to make a series of images that didn't only sort of address that loss, but celebrated the experiences and love for comedy that I'd built with those two gentlemen throughout the sort of younger periods of my life.
So what struck me about them is almost exactly what you just said. It's the gradiated background that draws your eye to where you need to be, and also the kind of the simplicity. And having chatted, and I now know that there's no trickery involved. It's all done properly, if you like, and they're just really clever, and they're so aesthetically pleasing.
The other thing is, I mean, they're a bit of a celebration, right? Yeah. They're a bit of a celebration of all that they're meant to be, and to hear that story is very moving. And I think that, you know, you should be immensely proud. I think the fact that it stands testament that you're in this place. And what was really great about the Graduate Art Show, it seems to offer that opportunity. Do you feel like it's offered that opportunity to you?
I was awestruck walking down the street, walking and seeing my work in the opening window, meeting all the lovely people inside. The feeling is honestly like no other. It's a feeling that I'll be forever grateful and probably won't ever forget. It's something I'd encourage everyone to apply for. To be honest, it's probably, if not one of the most proud moments of my life right now. I'm very much enjoying it, and to be honest, I believe I'm in a bit of shock.
Good,
but it's lovely. Yeah, it's a great show.
So as you heard then, Tim and I had a really lovely time at the Graduate Art Show launch night. Is that the private view? Is that the correct term? There we go. View, yeah. Let's keep educating me.
Yeah. So it's the private view for the Vanna Gallery.
Yeah.
Edition of the Graduate Art Show, having come down from London. So it was pretty fantastic to see a good turnout, a great turnout, wasn't it?
So very busy.
So very,
in fact, at points too busy.
Too busy for you, yeah. But we managed to get a couple of recordings outside, and I think you'll gather from the enthusiasm and the energy that the folk had on the night suggests that they're buoyed by the experience. A number of paintings and sculptures have already sold. So, to get that take up so quickly, so soon, it suggests that it's a great exhibition.
And what was nice was it wasn't just young artists. There was artists of all sorts of age, from the expected kind of mid to early 20s, right up through the generations.
Yeah, and I think that stands testament to that access to higher education and that opportunity that getting into art and doing something with it. So there is a sort of mature element to a lot of artists, a lot of creatives who come back to it from a different perspective, having had to pursue a different career.
And one of the things we've spoken about frequently is that bit of placing value on what you do, maybe in your back bedroom or your shed, and crossing that barrier into the kind of public sphere, if you like. I don't like using terms like public sphere, but that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
And maybe we need to encourage more people to share their work.
Yeah, is getting that work out there. And I think that is what this particular show offers in terms of opportunity.
And we probably need people to encourage others to do that by doing it themselves and saying, look, I found this, and not going, wow, look how amazing I am, but talk about how hard they found it the first time they did it.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things that was very, I got a lot of good feedback just in terms of being able to talk to the judging panel and being able to talk to people who've had that success or, are working on their own success in the industry. And they were sort of enthralled by just having that sort of opportunity to talk to people. You might have been surprised, but it was a fun night.
It was a really fun night. And we've been really lucky with everyone who's come on to help us with this podcast, be it David from the Vanna Gallery and Victoria, who is another of the judges alongside yourselves, but also the artists who talked really frankly to us. And we haven't been able to include everything from their interviews because otherwise this would be an hour and a half long podcast, and our chats with them. But the way they spoke about having their art included and the kind of experience of having such a because it's not a massive gallery, the Vanna Gallery, but it had a lovely buzz about it. It was very busy, and at points you could barely have a conversation because there were so many conversations going on. But that was mainly people who come to look talking to artists.
Yeah, well, it's the ripple effect, of that kind of exhibition and that kind of showcase. And it only kind of serves to kind of generate more kind of offshoots, I suppose. Be that collaborations or be that opportunities for others.
So this is a bit of a standalone special edition of the podcast. But if you enjoyed the content, please make sure you subscribe, follow, and rate us on your podcast platform so other people can find us. Tim, what are we going to be doing next on the Architecture Made Simple podcast?
I suspect that we'll be maybe looking at some self-building.
Nice. Yeah, that sounds like fun.
A bit of a switch up.
Yeah.
I think that we're getting to that time of year where people are looking to kind of set up and start on their own project. So, we're going to have a few thoughts around that.
Great. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Andy.